Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for being here. We're going to get started in a few minutes here as people come in from the waiting room. And I just want to send a quick thank you to everyone for being here for our program on careers and social justice. And of course, huge thank you to our alumni for joining us today. And I also want to acknowledge that this has been a stressful year, and I'm sure everyone, students and alumni included, are working through various challenges in their lives. So an extra special thank you for spending time with us today. My name is Cassie Petoskey, and I'm the director of the Waldron Student Alumni Connections Program, where our goal is to help Weinberg College students explore various career paths by connecting you with alumni who will share more about what they do. We're going to save plenty of time for questions at the end of today's session, so please don't be shy as we get into that portion of the program. My colleague Amani is going to be moderating Q&A, so when we get to that section, if you would like her to read off your question, you can send in a private chat to Amani or myself, and we'll make sure we get that question asked of our alumni. And if you would like to come over the camera and microphone to ask your own question, you can send that through the public chat and Amani will call on you. And of course, if we don't get to your question today or you have follow-up questions, we're going to be sharing out alumni's email addresses after so you can get in touch and connect further. And before we get into the panel where we hear from these great alumni, I would love to just take a minute where everyone sets down their pens and takes their hands off their keyboards or stops whatever they're doing and just take 2 deep breaths. And we often get so caught up in multitasking or quickly moving from one thing to the next. And I would love for everyone to be as present as possible during today's session to get as much out of it as possible. And so I would encourage students, if you're comfortable, to share your cameras while you're on the session and mute your microphone, as that's just been shown to help folks focus on being in the moment. And as we get started, I'd love for you to also listen for not only more about what these alumni do in their work and industry, but also how they went about making career decisions and how they evaluated their past experiences to figure out what they might want to do in their careers. Because it's great for you all to consider these paths for yourselves, but even if you don't pursue one of them directly, I hope you learn from alumni stories and advice, as well as enjoy the chance to build your network. So now I'd like to introduce my colleague, Amani Davis, who is going to share a little bit more about her work and what she does with young alumni and students through the Northwestern Alumni Association.
Thanks so much, Cassie. Hi, everyone. My name is Amani Davis, and I am a staff member at the Northwestern Alumni Association. I am the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement, specifically focusing on student to alumni transition. So I work really closely with graduating seniors, as well as very recent alumni. So if you're a senior and here, you've probably gotten my emails before. I'm very excited to be collaborating with Cassie and the Waldron Student Connection Program on another program and just continue this partnership that we have in just connecting students and alumni. Thank you so much, Cassie.
Great, thanks, Amani. And now I'm going to spotlight Lucy's video, and we'll start off with introductions. If you can just share a little bit more about your path from Northwestern to your career right now, and we'll get to the in-between during the panel.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today. Yeah, my name is Lucy. I use she and they pronouns. I currently live in New Orleans. It's also known by its indigenous name, Bulbancha. There are a lot of indigenous people here before colonization, among them the Homa, Chitimacha, Atacapa, and the Choctaw people. So I just wanted to start by naming that, naming the land that I'm on. And I work currently for the Institute of Women and Ethnic Studies. It's a local nonprofit in New Orleans that's been around for almost 20 years. Sorry, math is really hard. 15 years, yeah. Wait, no. 25 years. See, this is why I studied gender studies and American studies. And yeah, it's been around for 25 years, and they do a lot of work in New Orleans around making New Orleans a trauma-informed city. And that includes a lot of adolescent health. So my primary role is as a sexual health educator in public schools, yeah, around Louisiana, but mostly in New Orleans.
Great, thanks, Lucy. And now we'll move to Vernon for a quick intro.
Hello, I'm Vernon Smith. I graduated Northwestern in 2014. Right after graduation, I was unsure of what I wanted to do specifically, so I decided to go to grad school. I ended up at the University of Chicago School of Social Administration, which is kind of a combination of social work and a little bit of social policy. From there, I went to the U.S. Department of Education and their Financial Student Aid Office, monitoring student loans. And then I moved on to the National Association of Counties, which is a membership organization representing county government officials. And there I did grant work on justice initiatives, so helping county officials learn to reduce their jail populations and increase public safety. And currently I'm at the Lever for Change, which is an affiliate of the MacArthur Foundation here in Chicago. So working with high ultra worth network donors on creating competitions for different nonprofit areas such as feminism, racial equity, and the environment. So I've been in that role for about 4 months now.
Great, thanks, Vernon. And Precious, we'll go to you for a quick intro.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm Precious Wright, class of 2008, from the city of Chicago, born and raised. Northwestern was my dream school to attend. My pronouns are she and her. I worked with the Northwestern University Public Interest Program that really helped me start off my career post-graduation. I was able to work with Evanston Community Development Corporation, kind of do some grassroots business and economic development on the west side of Evanston, helping out with food deserts, ex-offender programs, farmers markets, all kinds of stuff, computer classes for seniors, just helping the community to become more self-sufficient. I then moved on to the Youth Job Center, which is still open. You guys have probably driven or walked by there over on Church Street. Where I had a women's advocacy program for 5 years, and also helping youth and young adults, ages 16 to 24, obtain employment. I'm also doing a version of that right now in my current role at the Alternative Schools Network. I'm a program manager and also their career pathway specialist. And so our program is slated inside of about 10 alternative high schools throughout the city of Chicago, the West. We've got one downtown, a plethora of schools on the west side of Chicago, and then South Chicago. And we're funded by the Cook County Workforce Partnership in order to help those students not only obtain their diplomas, but also get placed into either post-secondary opportunities, some sort of advanced training, or just be more self-sufficient with permanent employment opportunities.
Great, thanks, Precious. And we'll start with you for our first question. And it's great to hear, a little bit more about what you all are doing now and what you've done since graduation. What were some of the impactful classes and experiences you had while you were at Northwestern that kind of helped you figure out you might want to go down these paths?
So I always share, I was that typical, I really thought I was going to be a doctor when I went to Northwestern. My first major was biology. I didn't change my major until really junior year. I made the switch to psychology. I really love my science classes. Biology was great. I love hands-on things, all the nasty gooey stuff. I really like doing that, all the dissecting and that kind of thing. I could do that all day. But when it got to organic chemistry, it kind of kicked my butt. So I realized that being a full medical doctor was not my true passion. But I was more interested in the social side of psychology. And so being my junior year where I changed my major, it was a good thing because I was now able to having a lot of my classes and credits already count towards psychology as well. I was able to do a lot of independent studies and work with a lot of professors closely on their independent projects, doing surveys out into the community, doing research programs around youth development, child development. And so those little one-off, little independent courses where we were able to venture off campus, have some experience into the city of Chicago, because a lot of us don't do that. You know, we're right here, right next to the great city of Chicago, being in Evanston. And back then we were not able to really incorporate ourselves into the community. You know, it's like, we're going to just stay right over here by the water and the lake and just go to class. And it was good, even being from Chicago, getting out there in a different lens. So I would say, you know, the psychology department itself and the independent study programs that they offer once you get into your junior and senior years, once your core classes are covered. But I also took quite a few interesting classes. I love my human development class. I love my, there was a community asset development class that I also took that was really great. Again, you know, being from the city of Chicago and learning more about the city of Chicago, you know, all of the neighborhoods, the different sides of town, you know, the makeup of the city, and realizing that even in the city of Evanston, as diverse as we would like for it to be and say it is, there is still quite a strain on the diversity and a need for inclusion. So that class really helped me brighten my horizons on that, and realize that that's what I wanted to do. You know, dive right into the community and help people who look like me or did not look like me. And so I was able to develop some really strong relationships with the community police force, the school systems, the aldermen. You know, I found myself at city council meetings fighting for different grants to bring programs back to Evanston. So I would say those couple of classes in the independent studies with the psych program really did that for me. And then, of course, the Northwestern Public Interest Program towards the end of that, when it was time to graduate and figure out what I was doing post-graduation.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting, having the combination of the Northwestern influence and being from Chicago and diving into the community. Thanks for sharing, Precious. And Vernon, we'll move to you next with the same question of what were some of those impactful classes and experiences in undergrad?
Sure. I think going into Northwestern, I wanted to be a lawyer. I feel like that was probably my focus up until sophomore year. I ended up going into sociology, minoring in psychology and African American studies. I think taking those classes gave me a great foundation on how to approach practical work in the real world. I think psychology really gave me a biological and technical aspect of it, and then with sociology, a lot of theory, and then AFAM, Latino studies, Asian American studies really gives you that real world application of those theories and how they are in practice. I think it helps you really be able to articulate what is happening in the world when society is not working the way it should be or intended to. And I think it really helps being able to advocate on behalf of people at the macro level. And I also probably would add just really my experiences in student organizations, whether it is FMO or Pursuit, really helped garner a lot of skills in terms of program planning and work. And I think that's really important, and something that being at U Chicago, I noticed is really unique about Northwestern is how students really take charge in a lot of the programming and advocacy on campus.
Yeah, thanks, Vernon. And Lucy, will finish with you with this question of impactful classes and experiences.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Precious and Vernon said. To Precious's point about taking opportunities to get into Chicago, whether that's through, I did not do the PIP program, but I had a lot of friends who did and spoke really highly of it. So if that's an option for people, I can secondhand recommend it. And I also started pre-med at Northwestern, although I did not last that long. I think I was just mostly driven by an interest in knowing that I wanted to do good in the world and, advocate for more equitable society that I was not seeing. And I think as I went through Northwestern and took more gender studies classes, American studies, African American and Asian American and Latino studies classes. Also, I think, like Vernon said, really understanding how a lot of these structures are, actually not structured to be inclusive, right? And are not built for everybody, and how people have outside of institutions built structures for themselves, and how, so I think like learning a lot of that history. I did a lot of history stuff with my American Studies degree, a lot of archival research in Chicago that really helped me understand like the long legacy of social change and activism that exists all over the country, but in Chicago especially, that's where I was. And I think that really helped me understand that I'm joining a legacy of people who are working to make change, and it's not like I have to start from scratch. There's a long history of that activism and that advocacy. And I also want to plug one class that is not in those categories that I listed, but I don't know if they still offer it, but the history of higher education is taught co-listed with the American Studies and the History Department, I think. And I'd say that class really hits home, although maybe this is not its intention, but it really hits home the fact that, academia and colleges were not built with everyone in mind. They were built for rich white men. And I think that class really, it's really interesting to trace that legacy of student activists pushing for the institution to become more open and welcoming in all institutions across the country, not just Northwestern, obviously, but that class was super interesting and compelling. And if students have a chance to take that, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, that's great, Lucy. And thank you all for sharing more about where your spark was for your interest in social justice and how that kind of grew through undergrad. And I know you mentioned a little bit about your path since graduation. I'd love to dive into that first job or internship or role after graduation. And if you can tell us a little bit more, if it was like your plan A, if it wasn't your first choice, like how did you strategize about your career from there? And just kind of walk us through your experience with landing that first job, knowing that it is such a stress point for our students to get like a really good starting point. And Lucy, we'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely want to, normalize feelings of anxiety and a lack of clarity. I definitely had those my senior year. I was working on my thesis, and I was majoring in American Studies and Gender Studies with a minor in global health. And I was like, oh my gosh, can there be a more liberal, artsy cliche? Like, I am it. But so I was, having a lot of feelings about that, and then watching people who majored in econ or whatever, going to all those consulting workshops, or I forget what they're called, career fairs. I think that's what I'm trying to say, where people were getting jobs in, October. And I think I really had to, be patient with myself and be patient with like the process of jobs in the nonprofit sector, that, things don't work like that. You're not going to get a job like 9 months before you're expecting to start. And so, yeah, so, I think once I got that and just tried to enjoy the rest of senior year and know that, there will be a thing that will come, that was definitely helpful for me. And so I ended up, right after I graduated, I actually ended up working for a Northwestern Study Abroad in Cuba program, which I had attended as a student. And so that gave me a few months to kind of stave off the, not sure what I was doing next. And then I did a program called Avoda, which is a bit like AmeriCorps. So, one of those one-year programs that places you in a nonprofit, but Avoda is specifically focused on Jewish social justice and anti-poverty work. So That's what originally brought me down to New Orleans, was working with Avoda, and that was a 1-year program, and then that allowed me to create some connections in New Orleans and continue the search after that to, and I was lucky enough to work in a HIV clinic, which was really aligned with my interests at the time. And so, yeah, so I did that for a year. And then that program ended, and I definitely spent a few more months looking for other things to do while, just making ends meet, and trying to, get involved with local organizing efforts and volunteer stuff before I started working at my current job, and I've now been here for 2 years. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Lucy. And was that your like first choice out of school, or did you even like have a?
Yeah, I would say I was resistant to the idea of a first choice, and I was just trying to, listen to my gut and see what felt right and what worked, because definitely like rejection is a common thing and that happens. And so, yeah, I was just trying to make sure I kept a lot of my options open.
I like that, being resistant to the first choice and being open to different ideas. I think that's great. And Vernon, we'll go to you for the same question, a little bit more about that first role.
Sure. A part of my graduate program required 2 fieldwork assignments. So they pretty much just send you a survey asking you like what's your preference and what you don't absolutely want to do. I feel like I was down for anything except dealing with animals. So I ended up working as a case manager at Europe Chicago. So Europe is like a national program that teaches young adults who are from disadvantaged communities really how to work with IT. I think they expanded to other sectors as well, but it's kind of like training courses for 6 months and then a 6-month paid internship. So my job was really to make sure that I was assisting students with managing any obstacles or barriers that were happening outside the program. Really looking at housing was a huge issue, domestic violence, mental health. It was probably the most rewarding and most exhausting job I've ever had. I really love just seeing how these students would transform in just a year's time. And I think at the same time, I was just very exhausted. Like I would come home and I couldn't even watch TV. Like I just need to sit in silence for like an hour. And I think at that point, I realized that I wanted to continue working in this space, but not doing direct service. So I really kind of planned my second year in grad school, really looking more at research and program management aspects of that, which kind of led me down the road to working in government at the U.S. Department of Education. That was back in 2016, so you can probably imagine how that went and why I pivoted again more to criminal justice.
Yeah, I love that story, Vernon. And I feel like I've heard this from alumni before, where you don't necessarily know what you want to do until you do something you don't want to do. And you're like, okay, you pivot from there, which I think is great to realize and kind of find while you're, early in your career.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like being in grad school was a great place to really experiment with that. If you guys can find programs that allow for fieldwork experience, I feel like that's a great value add.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. And Precious, we'll finish off this question with you about the first role and how that influenced your career.
So again, the PIP program, I was able to be a part of that great opportunity just a couple of months shy of graduating my senior year at Northwestern. It was an opportunity to match graduates with local nonprofits in the Chicagoland area. It was kind of set up in a subsidized way, where, we wasn't sure where we get health insurance or not, depending on the agency's capacity. Very grassroots, beginning. and opportunities of your career that really truly turned out to be the best thing that happened to me, honestly. I remember doing the matchmaking process, and I think I chose maybe about 3 organizations that I really wanted to work for. But of course, we know it doesn't always go the way you want it to go. And those 3 organizations had chosen other students as their first choice. And then this one organization, they chose a student as their first choice, but that student chose another organization as their first choice. And so it was really funny because I had this agency call me in the middle of the night, participated in the program, and just saying, we're going to be honest with you. We offer the position to one of your fellow peer students. We just want to go over, what we're offering. We kind of changed our formula. We're actually going to add in the additional dollars for health insurance. And this is what we do. We're on the 2nd and 5th wards of Evanston. We want to do, put these type of programs in place. And I just remember feeling like, that could have been a moment where I could have been like, oh, I don't want to be a second choice, or, I feel bad that the choices that the agencies that I picked didn't pick me. But I was super excited to work with this agency, so much that they hired me before I graduated, before I even walked the floor. So I was working basically a full-time job the beginning of May, right before I received my diploma. So it turned out to be the greatest opportunity. I was able to work my way up from just being a fellow. I think we called ourselves fellows at that point for that first year. But then if you retained your position with the agency, they would have to, figure out your role. And I moved up from being a program manager to an interim executive director, just in two years working with the agency. We were really instrumental in helping businesses be sufficient. That was the beginning of the LEND program at Northwestern, the Lending for Evanston and Northwestern Development, the microloan fund program. So if you're ever on the west sides of Evanston, over in that Church Dodge area, a bunch of barber shops, the cafe over there, we were very instrumental in making sure that those businesses stayed afloat, from offering the very first microloan business fund. We actually had a small grant program as well, where you didn't have to pay it back. But it was, we were able to assist the businesses with inventory. We helped them market. We established the Church Dodge Merchant Association, helping the businesses to come together and work amongst themselves to help build capacity and share customers across the different types of products that they served. I was able to work with ex-offenders being re-entered into society. We did the farmers market, the first farmers market. Most of you are probably familiar with the farmers market downtown Evanston, but I was the one who brought the farmers market to the west side of Evanston, the West End Market. And so they were able to grow fresh fruit and vegetables, and then use those fruits and vegetables in the cafe that the ex-offenders actually helped build through a program with the JPEG, I believe. It's a federal grant where they were given construction trades grants to youth and individuals to learn like HVAC and those kind of things. So it was always like a pretty 360 thing going on with everything that we were able to do. And I really grew in my role, and I was able to establish all these great relationships. The YWCA of Evanston ended up honoring me for the work that I did with this agency. I don't know if I said the name. They were called Evanston Community Development Corporation. They're no longer around now, but doing the PIP program and being able to work with ECDC fresh out of college and establishing all of those good, solid relationships that I keep right now today. I just recently moved back to the north side of Chicago. I'm just a couple of paces shy of being in Evanston. And so I'm in the East Rogers Park area, but being back this way just makes me feel so much more connected to Northwestern, so much more connected to the work that I did in Evanston. But it was really great. I got some really good experience out of that for 2-3 years.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really great to hear more about all the different things that you're involved in, Precious. And of your experience within undergrad, what has surprised you that you've learned that you use today? And can you talk a little bit about like the broad arts and science background and how you see that playing out in your work?
I think it's all relatable. I'll even mention what I'm doing right now. I'm in my master's program right now through Northeastern. I never saw myself getting an MSW per se, but I built great relationships with my current employer and they're actually paying for it. And so even going over some of the things now that we went over back in college, the human development, all the way down to just really learning about the family network, how you come from infant to emerging, childhood to young adults, and realizing the need and the services for each of those populations. um, the classes at Northwestern really help with that, even on the science side. Even though I consider myself to kind of leave that, that main focus for science, but it's definitely still a part of the work that I do now because you have to know people. I'm a people person. You have to provide services. You have to understand emotional intelligence. You have to understand how to connect with your clients, with your youth, be able to tell your story, be able to gain trust, in order to do the work that you have to do in order to get the outcomes that you have to do. I hope I'm answering the question. But it was the classes mixed with the experience, and then also mixed with my personal experience being a foster care youth. I was emancipated once I graduated Northwestern, but all 4 years of college, I was considered to be a foster child. I'm working on my book right now. I have a whole story to tell myself being born to drug addicted parents and things like that. It was really good coming to Northwestern and being welcome and having the opportunity to get close with professors, to be able to tell your story and then relate the work that they were doing to what was going to really shape my career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Precious, thank you so much for sharing more about the combination of all of these different factors playing out in your current work. And Vernon, I'm going to send the same question to you with what has surprised you that you learned and how has the arts and science background played out?
I think really just being able to write and synthesize a lot of information is super helpful in any career in social justice. You have to be able to really persuade decision makers and funders in a succinct way because people don't like to read. And also just being able to interpret data is also very important. I did not pay as much attention in statistics classes that I took that I should have, but if that's a skill that I feel like is really missing in the social justice area, if you can do that, you'll be very marketable in that job market. But I think really just being able to tell a story, but also really being able to connect the dots with data is probably the most important thing that you can get out of Northwestern.
Yeah, I love that. And people don't like to read. And it is interesting where you go from like academia and into the real world where you need to have things concise. The shorter, the better. Whereas, in college, you're writing these long papers. And so I think that's, using that skill in a different way is so important. Thank you for sharing. And Lucy, teeing this question over to you. What has surprised you that you use today and the arts and science background?
Yeah, I think what sticks out to me the most is I think the arts and science background gave me a deep respect for and an understanding of the usefulness of history and deeply understanding the history of this country, the history of the nonprofit system and philanthropy and like all those things. That's really given me a way to question why things are the way that they are, that I think just keeps me motivated and keeps me wanting to learn more. It keeps me, always looking at the bigger picture. And I think that that's definitely carried through from my arts and science background. But I definitely agree with Vernon. If you have a chance to take a statistics class, go for it. Yeah, I think pairing that history with an importance of research, whether that's qualitative or quantitative, and understanding the way those things are playing out today is very valuable going into wanting to make some sort of social change.
Yeah, that's great, Lucy. Thanks. And we'll start with you with this next question. And I'll share with students on the call. This is, I'll ask this last question and then we'll get into Q&A. So if you have some questions for our alumni, feel free to send those in. But Lucy, this is around networking. So can you tell us a little bit about networking within your industry and how that might, I know you mentioned earlier, like, your peers who are in econ going into consulting, the timeline of networking is very different in different industries. Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience and, some advice for students specifically interested in social justice work?
Yeah, for sure. I will preface this by saying that networking is definitely a skill I'm still building and learning, and something that, as someone who identifies as an Enneagram number 9, if anyone is familiar with that, a very non-confrontational person. So networking is very intimidating to me, but I will say that it's very useful. And I think someone mentioned earlier, relationships really are how things get done a lot of the time. And so I would just say, my personal mantra is not to be afraid to reach out to someone. The worst that could happen is they're not going to respond, right? And then it's like no sweat off your back. So I would say reaching out to people in the, anyone who works at a place that you find interesting, and just being like, hey, do you have a second to tell me about your journey? Or I'm thinking about going in this field and I'd love to hear your perspective. I'd say it never hurts to ask. And I think, volunteering or, getting involved with local organizing that's happening, I think is another important way, to just, feel like you're making a difference without having to be employed exactly in the thing that you care about, because that oftentimes takes a little bit to happen, but I think you'll make a lot of connections that way as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Getting involved in volunteer work or things like that is a form of networking and building out who in the industry. That's a great point, Lucy. Thanks for sharing. And Vernon, we'll move to you for the same question and like your experience with networking.
Yeah, I think it was funny when I started working at Year Up. I didn't really have any professional skills, so I was kind of learning with my students, and that was one thing that we really pushed them to, is always networking and getting people's names and contact information and staying in touch. So I think that's something that has been super valuable in my career. I think you coming out of Northwestern, you're already given a huge network of professionals and people in a lot of different areas and places. So I think just taking advantage of that is important. I've done a couple networking events when I lived in DC with Northwestern, their alumni chapter there. So it's been really interesting just to see how your work connects to other people's work that that you might not even think about in the first place. I'm always happy to talk to anybody who wants advice on career help. So I think that the best way to always know about new opportunities or get inside information is definitely through your network. My current job I got because I did a lot of work for the MacArthur Foundation in my last position, and I always made a point to talk with our grant funders, and they knew me and were able to recommend me for the job just because they know my experience and my work ethic. So always, no matter who they are, just making sure that the people in that space that you're working in is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And out of curiosity, Vernon, you mentioned knowing people at the MacArthur Foundation and that being integral. Have you had any examples of having a Northwestern connection for either you getting a job or helping someone else?
I don't think so. I do know there were a lot of. Well, actually, I lied. I don't know. I don't know if it directly led me to getting the job, but my manager at my old job, she went to Northwestern Law School. So that was something that we could connect to during the interview, which was nice.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's a good example. And I'm sure it will only grow as you get further in. So that's great. Thanks, Vernon. And Precious, same question to you about networking and how that's been integral in your work. And if you have any Northwestern connections too. Now I want to tee it back to each of you for this, if you have any good Northwestern stories.
So I had to really truly learn how important networking is. Vernon is absolutely correct. Just by being a part of the Northwestern community, and then becoming an alum, you are a part of that network. But I'm pretty sure, like myself, a lot of us felt like, as we came in from our different cities and towns and high schools that we graduated from as top-notch class, all A's, really good GPAs, and then we're here at Northwestern and the competition is going, and there might be a little bit of segregation where it's like, you're working and fighting to get good grades, and you might not be necessarily reaching out to a whole lot of people because you're just, going off of the strength and the energy from high school that you can do this. You're an A+ student, this is no problem. But networking was very important. Soon after my freshman year, I would say, working more with professors, establishing that relationship for classes and for development outside of school. By the time I got to the Youth Job Center, I actually incorporated networking workshops, of which I used some professionals from Northwestern to come in to do those workshops. We actually started a mentorship program where several Northwestern staff were mentors to women in my program that may or may not be sitting in similar roles as the young women desires for career choices, but to just see another woman in that role, to be able to give back on how they got to where they were, and to do some networking was very, very important. We also did literally workshops where there was a dinner setup or a certain event, and teaching folks how to have conversations with individuals and not get stuck talking to them all night. You know how that could be. It was like, oh, we've chatted a little bit. I kind of want to move around the room a little bit, see who else is here. And it's a skill. It's a real skill to learn how to do that, to have a conversation with someone and kind of walk over and introduce them to someone else and say, hi, this is so-and-so. They're from this organization. Why don't you talk to each other and tell one another what you guys do? And, before you know it, you're gone. You're out of the situation now. And now you've got those individuals talking. So it definitely is a skill. I would encourage you guys to look into specific networking training if you're not as comfortable with it, because it is very important. I do have a lot of connections. I want to get more involved. Even being a part of the Waldron Council was very good for me, and I want to do more now that I'm back on the north side, Evanston side of town. But I would piggyback also on my colleague saying more about the job shadowing. Pick and choose where you want to, if you could wake up tomorrow morning in your dream job, where would that be? If it's Google, check out Google. See who works there. What roles exist there, and call people, email people, and just say, like she said, are you willing to just chat with me? Tell me how your story or any advice you might have for myself trying to get into a career. And more often than not, people are more than willing to have conversations with you, and probably more so now during COVID, because we're all stuck at home, bored out of our minds and wanting to do something other than work. So hearing from a young person who's excited about what you do, this might be a great time to network. It might have to be via Zoom, but I would just really encourage everybody to not forget that piece, because it is sometimes who you know, not what you know.
Yeah, that's great. And Precious, like you mentioned, now is a great time to reach out while people are really looking for those connections and wanting to feel a sense of community, because we are working from home and it is tricky. So, you know, students definitely seems like our alumni are excited to connect. So we're going to share out email addresses, and I'll just encourage people to reach out, even if it is just a thank you email. That's a great way to, you know, start that relationship and be able to reach out down the road. So that's great, Precious. Thank you.
No problem. I just wanted to say LinkedIn as well. I mean, as we're sitting here, I see a few of the students are in. I'm probably overdue to update my account. But over the years, LinkedIn has been very instrumental in just kind of seeing who else is connected to Northwestern or who else is connected to this sort of organization, and just shooting folks a quick note on LinkedIn to see how you can connect. So.
That's great. That's great, Precious. Thank you. And Lucy, I realized we didn't ask you if you had any, you know, good Northwestern connections or network that either you got the role because of that, or, you know, has that Northwestern network helped you in your career?
I don't think I have a very good story for this, but in Louisiana, there is a Northwestern State University. So sometimes people think I went there, and then that's fun.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Well, thank you all for sharing. And Amani, I'm going to tee it over to you. I'll spotlight your video just as we get into Q&A to get into our student questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cassie. Thank you everyone for this great conversation so far. I'll start off with a quick question that someone had about another program at Northwestern. I know we talked about PIP a lot, but was anyone involved in the prison education program? All righty. I think that will be one. Yeah, Precious.
I said, no, I don't know about that one at all. I'd like to look into it.
Yeah, is that a new program?
Do you guys know when established?
I am not sure. We had that question in from Andrea.
I think someone is saying it's a fairly new program.
Thank you. Thank you for that insight.
Okay.
Definitely try and find the link for that and pop it in the chat. Awesome. So we also have a question from a student who submitted this ahead of time, but has there ever, and whoever wants to tackle this, feel free, but has there ever been a time in your career that your job went against your beliefs? If so, can you talk us through how you navigated that experience?
I can go. So I think when I was at the National Association of Counties, we are bipartisan, so we really have to be careful about the way we frame certain issues, and some issues we avoid altogether. I think my work in terms of creating more opportunities for justice-involved individuals focuses a lot on racism and systemic racism, and it's something that is tricky territory when writing materials and creating panel discussions about that. So I think it really took a lot for me to kind of learn to navigate how to talk about that issue in a way that wasn't polarizing. So unfortunately, sometimes a politician might not see the value, the social value of reducing jail populations, but if I can spin that in terms of, well, you would save money by not having to pay for all these nights for people to be in jail, that might bring them on board, and hopefully I can share that, the personal aspect of that and why it's important socially on the back end. But I think sometimes it really challenged me to change my approach and really find a way to get more people on my side to look at ways to implement social justice initiatives.
Thank you for that response. Anyone else want to tackle that one?
I will share a little bit. So the grant that funds my program, it's a workforce grant. And so their immediate focus is permanent employment. There's actually really only two goals for the program, for outcomes that we have to achieve in order to continue to receive money, for me to continue to have a job, and to continue to work with our student populations inside of our high schools, which is one, post-secondary placement, right? Go to college, or get some type of advanced training, CNA, security certificate, something of that sort, or to just be permanently placed into a job. So we work inside the high schools. So what else is important to us before you get to post-secondary and before you get to a full-time job? The high school diploma. And so we think it's very important. We do a lot of research around the importance of obtaining your high school diploma, how much you could potentially earn over a lifetime with or without it. And so we find ourselves always fighting for just that piece there, because traditionally, out of all the agencies that this grant covers, most of those places are set up like a one-stop shop employment place. It's literally set up for you, like almost like the youth job center, actually, to just walk in and you're looking for a job. So you either need some resume help, you need some help interviewing, you need some help connecting to an employer. It's all about, for the most part, I'm coming to get a job. Now, once you sit down and do intake, you might figure out that there's some other issues there that you can assist with. Maybe she's a teen mom looking for a parent. She needs resources there. Maybe it's a young man who has some criminal background. He's looking for a job, but you've got to address the criminal background. So now we're partnering with agencies to pull his rap sheet, see if we can get some things off his background and things like that. So, you provide all of these wraparound services to get to the outcome that the grant, our funders, is looking for. But I think if they could say it without getting in trouble, excuse my language, the way I'm going to say it, they would say, forget your high school diplomas. We don't care about that. We don't care about that. We just want to make sure people are getting some advanced training or that they get a job. And we're like, before you can do all of that, you need the high school diploma, So that's one issue that we deal with on the daily, fighting how important that is, whether it's a traditional diploma or a GED, because we have one of our schools that's specific for folks who still can't be successful in the alternative high school realm and need to move over to some smaller classes with our GED program, but it's very successful. So it's one aspect.
Thank you. And Lucy, do you have something?
Yeah, I can definitely add onto that grant piece as well. As Precious just mentioned, sometimes you work under these grants. In my case, I work under a federal grant to fund sex education. And as you might imagine, the priorities of the federal government are a little different than one might hope when it comes to sex education. So the curriculum that we're funded to teach is not very gender inclusive. It's pretty, teen pregnancy is bad and that's the end of it type of thing. It's very rigid in that. And, I work for an organization that's trauma informed and understands that some people may be teen parents that we're teaching. Some people may be the children of teen parents. And to say that that is bad is going to automatically alienate all of those students and create a really unsafe classroom environment. So there are definitely situations where, you have to walk that line of not wanting to lose your funding, but also not wanting to do something that is going against your beliefs. And I think, that's obviously a personal place that people have to sit in. But if I can plug one book about that, The Revolution Will Not Be Funded is an awesome resource to check out that brings up a lot of issues around grant funding and a lot of those stipulations that people who do work in big nonprofits and work for big donors and stuff are working to change. So not to say that it's all bad, but sometimes those structures are trying to do the right thing, but can have some unintended consequences.
Sure, thank you for that. I just heard about that book this week. It is literally sitting in my Amazon cart. I will definitely buy it, and thank you. Awesome. So then, Precious, we also wanted to know just about graduating in 2008, maybe during a tough economy. Is there any advice that you would give students interested in this kind of work but are maybe also concerned about money after graduation?
Yeah, I was a true hustler before I graduated Northwestern. I think at some point as a senior, I was working 3 jobs, but it worked out because one of them included the school library. So I was able to still study and make sure I graduated on time. Um, Working for an advertising agency downtown just a couple of days a week. And then good old Papa John's pizza a couple of nights on the weekend. Um, Being able to experience that. Um, it was tough, it was tough. I did the PIP program. I was fortunate enough to get a decent salary and also health insurance. And I know some of my peers were not able to obtain both of those things. But what was really nice about the role being in a nonprofit organization is that you're really able to shape what you do. Of course, there's a job description, right? There's some basic things that the agency is looking for you to do. But I was able to be very creative in the type of programs that we offered. Um, and because of the programs that we offered and being in the neighborhoods and working with individuals and networking, that in turn turned into other opportunities. And so now people are starting to figure out what you're doing, the impact that you're doing. And so now you get contacted to come and speak, paid speaking engagements. I was able to be the speaker for Chicago Foundation for Women, their yearly annual fundraiser one year. Paid me a nice coin, as some of my youth say, a nice piece of penny, to go and speak to about 400 people. So other things will come through networking and opportunity. And then I would also like to say, when I had my women's program and doing those different workshops, along with networking being a topic, how to negotiate a raise was very important. And I actually partnered with a young lady at the Women's Institute over at Northwestern to come in and teach my women on how to negotiate a raise, because that's very important. We want you to be confident in your abilities at work, your potential, your worth, so there's a way to go about it, based off of tenure, based off of if there's any specific policies that your employer has, that at the end of that fiscal year, you have every right to, provide a list of strengths, a list of accomplishments, and to throw some things out on the table to earn a higher wage. It may not always go the way you want it to go. You may not always get, excuse me. You may not always get, can you guys still hear me? You may not always get the wage that you're looking for, but it'll come. It'll come, It can't always be about money, especially when you first graduate. Everybody knows that, right? We're all broke college students still, right? But it will come. And I would certainly like to say that for the nonprofit field, a lot of folks are just scared of that just altogether. Even if you're working in nonprofit for 10, 20 years, there's a stigma that, there's a cap, you won't be able to earn over a certain amount no matter how long you're there. And that's just simply not true. The social service agency that I'm with now has been around for over 40 years. Like I just shared with you, they have lots of good programming. They have this pathway to get your master's degree pretty much for free if you're interested. My executive director is super, super awesome and super supportive, really cares about us as a person, and is definitely supporting us through the COVID time. We're not even scheduled to return back to work physically until April 5th. Isn't that crazy? But woohoo. So you'll find your niche. It won't, like I said, even if it doesn't come right away, don't be discouraged. Just really invest yourselves in the roles and just, network and other opportunities will come.
That is great advice, Precious. Thank you. And then other panelists, as we round out the program here, if anyone has any last advice for students, feel free to give those now.
I think I want to echo what Precious said about pay and really encouraging people in this space to advocate for a living wage for yourself. I think in graduate school, it was really taboo to talk about pay at all. But I think my cohort professor really made sure before we graduated, she kind of locked the door and turned the lights on and was like, make sure you guys are asking for a livable wage. I think sometimes it's disrespectful what people want to pay people in this industry just because they think that we're bleeding hearts that we don't deserve to be paid fairly. Highly recommend looking at GuideStar. It's a website where you can look at 990 forms for tax for all nonprofits, and you can really get a glimpse of how much money this organization actually has, and it also shows you, I think, like the top 10 paid employees to give you a better sense of what these organizations can actually pay you. So I always do that before I would apply for anything.
Really good advice.
Definitely. Any other last bits of advice for students? So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Amani, for leading our Q&A. And Lucy, I saw you turn your microphone off. Do you want to add any last bits?
The only last bit I would add is just take care of yourself and your mental health. I think working in this field, like, Vernon shared that experience of like not coming home and not even being able to watch TV, it can be draining. And so like recognizing what you can do for yourself, and, learning when to say no, I think it's just very important to keep in mind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, this has been really great, a really great session. Thank you to our alumni for being here with us today and sharing so many great insights, and for all our students for tuning in. Students who are on the call, I'll be sending out a Grubhub gift card, so be sure to keep an eye out in your email inbox for information about that. We normally like to buy students lunch when you come to our programs, and so this is something small that we can do to be a little bit more like what we used to have when we were in person. So keep an eye out for that, and thank you for tuning in. Thanks to our alumni for being here, and we hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Go Cats.
Thank you, everyone.